Good afternoon, everybody. I call to order this Finance Committee meeting for May 12th, 2025. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Rawls. Commissioner Barrett.
Present.
Here. Commissioner Oster. Here. Commissioner Jackson. Commissioner Russell. Here. Commissioner Hill. Here. Commissioner Lee. Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Fox. Commissioner Jay.
Here.
Commissioner Frazier. 7 members present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any amendments to today's agenda in the committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the last meeting as sent to you. Is there a motion?
To approve.
Motion by Commissioner Hill, second by Commissioner Durrett. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Drusilla, do we have anybody signed up for public forum? No one has signed up for public forum. We'll start right with a summary report and information provided on Knox County Schools from the Knox County Schools Finance Director, Mr. Ron McPherson. If you would please join us at the podium, state your name and address for the record, please. There's a digital copy of this report in your agenda. Oh, hold on, I gotta hit the red button there. Hold on. Probably have to put the battery in. Let's give it a second. Like us, it needs a minute. Just hit the red button, and when it gets fired up, it'll get going there.
There we go. All right, thank you. The introduction wasn't supposed to be this difficult, so thanks for the help. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'll try to be brief. I know we have a full slate on the agenda. So this is a report through 3 quarters of the fiscal year. I would still characterize this as we're in a solid position. Fund balance, we're at probably about 13% of our budget, which is significantly higher than the 3%. Required minimum that the state requires school districts to maintain, actually a little above the recommended minimum from the GFOA. So on paper, we look pretty good from a reserve standpoint. I always like to issue kind of a caveat, though, when we're talking about fund balance, because while on paper we do look strong from industry standards, just keep in mind that our level covers about 2 months worth of payroll, right? So God forbid anything catastrophic would happen, but when you think about 2 months, that's, not a lot, right? So again, from industry standards in comparison to other educational entities, I think we're in pretty good shape, but it's kind of relatively speaking from a practical standpoint. On the operations front, we're still tracking really closely to where we were this time last year with respect to percentage of actual to budget, the revenue streams, the expenditure streams, tracking accordingly. There's not been any real surprises, fortunately, on the expenditure side. Revenue's tracking a little more, a little bit of a surplus. We're at about 4% more than we were this time last year with respect to sales taxes. The year before, we closed the year at about 3.5% more than the prior year. About 7.5% before that. And the 2 years before that, they were like banner years, right? Those were the COVID years. And, that's when we had like record growth numbers for those 2 years. So it's pretty much normalized, but it's been fairly consistent. So nothing really unusual or odd going on there. We do have some concerns, and I've mentioned this in the past. We always try to keep a close look on infrastructure needs and costs, particularly with respect to debt service costs in comparison to our general purpose budget. And as you know, over the last several years, we have found the need to build some new schools. Obviously, with that comes a significant amount of debt obligations. And so our debt levels have risen over the last several years. Anytime those levels exceed the countywide debt service fund and the capacity to fund those projects, then it becomes the responsibility of the general purpose budget to assume those costs. And so anytime budget year rolls around, we have to pay particular attention to not just our educational initiatives and what's needed there, but infrastructure needs as well, right? So there's kind of a balance there that obviously we're in the business of education, but we can't ignore the infrastructure needs too. So we find ourselves sometimes in an awkward position where infrastructure needs compete with capital needs for essentially the same dollars. And so we have to pay particular attention to that. Also, felt it necessary to include this other item, uncertainty with respect to federal grant funding. I know this was discussed at the last commission meeting, so I won't elaborate. I will just say that there is still some uncertainty out of Washington about what that may look like. Our Department of Education at the state continues to be in close contact with the feds. We continue to be in close contact with the state. Nothing really concrete has come out. We're kind of holding our fingers. What we have been told, absent of any concrete information, we're going along with the assumption, based on what the state is telling us, that funding levels will be static. That's actually what we're hoping for, right? It'd be great if they increase, but that might be a bit more to hope, too much to hope for. So for the sake of planning purposes, we are assuming a static type level, but we understand that that's not official, right? So that's one thing we're keeping a close watch over as well. And then finally, some trends to watch.
Before you move on to the next point, approximately how much in federal funding does the school system receive every year?
Well, the bulk of this would be, I'm going to say probably 60 some odd million, not counting ESSER. Don't hold me to that. I'd have to look. I can tell you that with our title funding, it's close to $20 million. With IDE funding, it's like $35 million. So it may be lower than $60 million. I may be mixing some of the remaining ESSER dollars into that. But our two biggest programs would be our title funding. The bulk of the title funding goes towards schools with higher concentrations of student poverty, economically disadvantaged students. IDEA relates primarily to special education needs, students with disabilities. Keep in mind also, this funding it essentially supplements over and above what we can do in the general purpose budget. So we can't find ourselves cutting the general purpose budget in favor of one of the federal grants, right? Because that would be what they call supplanting, which is you get some really serious trouble with feds if you try to do that. So it is supplemental, but we do rely very heavily on those funds. But the bulk of that would be special education, and then title funding would be the two biggest ones, and those are the ones we always keep our eye on. We do have some about $1 million worth of Perkins grant, which goes primarily towards career and technical types of education. But we are kind of on the edge of our seats waiting for those numbers, because here we are in May, and then principals still need to be doing their budgets, right, for that title, the title funding and so forth. So we are working with them. Our federal programs department is working with them. And again, based on the state's guidance, to assume a same general level of funding, but we've also made it very clear to principals that, okay, this is kind of soft money for now, but we'll continue to work with them on that. Last thing, I think I kind of feel like a broken record because I keep this on here all the time about things to watch for, and that would be future economic conditions. Consumer spending, we rely very heavily on that on our budget. Sales tax is probably maybe a third or more of our funds, our general purpose budget. But also in regards to that, TISA, which is about 49% of our budget, of course, relies on that at the state level. So any downturn in consumer spending would have very negative impacts on our budget. Fortunately, we haven't had to encounter that for a number of years. And we continue to see really favorable results. We're at about 4% more than we were this time last year. So we continue to see surplus dollars collected year over year. The thing that bothers me a little is I probably read too much, but when I look at some of these economic forecasts, and I've read quite a bit on that, and economists are really divided on this. Like some economists are saying, no need to worry about a recession over the next 12 months. Others are saying it's absolutely going to happen. Others are saying, it's probably about a 50 or 40% chance, whatever. Obviously, they don't know. But I really don't think we can ignore some of that, which is why we try to budget somewhat conservatively each year. One thing I'm encouraged by, though, is if you remember back several years ago, practically every economist that we listened to predicted that the economy would essentially fall off the cliff during the COVID years, and we know that it simply did not happen. So economists can be wrong, right? But we do feel the need to at least pay attention to this and kind of look at these factors that they go by. So we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed here. We do believe we have a conservative budget that takes some of that into account. But not in panic mode. So anyway, that's a pretty quick report. I'd be happy to take any more questions if you have any.
Any questions for Mr. McPherson? Commissioner Rawls.
Mr. McPherson, just for my information, I know the title funding, but does it go directly to the systems, or does it go state and then to the system?
It goes straight from the feds it goes from the feds to the state, and then the state then allocates accordingly based on the economically disadvantaged population of the district. And then at that point, the district will then do what we call a spiral. They will then rank schools according to the percentage of their economically disadvantaged students, and then we will allocate accordingly based on that. We'll allocate more heavily towards those schools that have a greater concentration of poverty.
Remind me what that title funding was for Knox County?
So I think for title as a whole was about $19 million.
19.
I believe Title 1A, which is the bulk of this with students with economically disadvantaged students. I can get you the exact numbers. I think it's probably around $15 million or so, but also within that title, within those total title dollars, there are also dollars that go for neglected students, immigrant students with learning a second language. So there are some other things that go for that, but the majority goes for the students that are economically disadvantaged in those schools with higher concentrations of poverty from the state. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Chairman Jay. Thank you for the fund balance. How are you, Ron? Do you anticipate this final quarter? Is there any plan to have to get into that fund balance? Can you talk about that?
I sure can. As a part of our operating budget, I actually factored that in when I was looking at the percentage of the budget in relation to next year. Our percentage of fund balance, I like to look at it based on the following year's proposal, right? And so it's probably about 13%, but it also takes into account what we plan to bring to commission, and it's noted within our capital plan, right? So $4 million and our budget, right? So our capital plan had committed, even in last year's plan, to contribute. I believe it's about $4 million to supplement this year's or the upcoming capital plan. What that does is that does save us money over a 20-year period, right? That probably saves us a couple of $1 million over a 20-year period. Mm-hmm. Anytime we can pay cash instead of borrowing the money, it's good. We also plan to use $4 million to actually pay off a particular bond. It's an old QSCAB bond. We owe probably about $3 million a year. We only have we have like a year and a half remaining or something like that. Yeah. So if we can pay that off, we actually free up that annual cost of debt, which would be principal and interest over time. So we can pay that off, not incur any. There's no prepayment penalty to that. We can avoid those interest charges. So number one, it pays off a bond a couple of years early, and then number two, it creates capacity in our general purpose, so we're not having to dip into that to pay for that debt. It's a great question.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's great. I love it when we're able to do that and not jeopardize, the
Right.
minimum requirement.
Yeah.
Also, just relating to our grant money, and these questions you may not know, but would you happen to know how many employee positions are directly related? And I know it's soft money and they're not, they're not guaranteed employment. I understand that. But do you know how many school personnel positions are tied to that money?
I don't, but I can get that. I
Okay.
can tell you that quite a number would relate, particularly with IDEA. I can tell you quite a bit of that would relate to educational assistance. And it's not unusual that when we have in the past when we have given salary increases in the general purpose budget, those same increases or that same growth has not accompanied the grants. And so what we found is we've had to supplement some of those positions as general purpose.
Understood.
So
and what is that total amount that we have to supplement?
Yeah,
'Cause it's significant.
Yeah, we've had to do that over time, from time to time.
Yeah.
I don't have that at my fingertips. I just know that now. I think probably the last couple of years, our folks have done a really good job, with saying, okay, we can't afford it, right? Because of these raises, we just can't afford it, and so we're going to have to tighten our belts a little bit. In other cases, we've been able to go to some carryover funding that the state allows, so it's the grants typically like if you have a 15-month period initially to pay that, it ultimately though becomes 27 months, so the state will allow it, or the feds will allow us to do that. That's another thing that we're a little bit unclear about. Will that continue, right? So I don't have that at my fingertips. Shouldn't be a problem to get that for you.
The number used to be, I believe, was it around 23% more employees that we had than was actually required, or was that too high? Actually required by our state.
Sounds a little high, but you may be right. You have a history there, so
Okay.
So I wouldn't hesitate to defer to your institutional knowledge on that.
That might be a little high. It might be more like 18, but it is more than just a few.
It is a significant
that
number
we provide to our system that is over and above what the state requires.
Yes.
Okay, and one more question. Do you know, has our percentages of economically disadvantaged gone up?
They've actually gone down.
Good.
And so that's which is a good thing, right?
Yes.
What that also means, though, is less money coming from the feds. I believe the state has also experienced this same phenomenon, right? So it's a couple of things. So for one, it's the dollars have been almost static. In some cases, they've actually decreased a little over the last couple of years from the feds. And there's a couple of factors there. One is less numbers on a proportional basis for Tennessee as compared to other states. And then number two, less in Knox County, so it gets diluted even further. What compounded this, I think I've mentioned this before, this was years ago. There was some sort of glitch in the Department of Education at the federal level, at the state level when the feds were looking at the State Department of Education, some sort of a glitch in an audit and an over-reporting. I don't remember exactly what that was. The state, clearly communicated that to all the districts. But there's this credit that's been trying to make that up. So we've kind of been hit a little bit on three sides. The reductions have not been drastic, but we haven't seen those increases. That would cover what one would hope to be just inflationary increases, and that hasn't happened.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's all.
Commissioner Fox?
Thank you, Commissioner Jay. I have a question. You already referenced it a little bit. You said immigrant students for Title I-A grants and ESL students. So how many students that are illegally here, in other words, they have violated the immigration laws of the United States, is Knox County serving right now, and what amount of money is being dedicated to educating them?
I don't know that we would have that answer. I would probably have to defer to other departments that would have that answer. I'm not sure that I'm not certain. I'm afraid to actually comment on that because I'm not sure. I'm not certain if we have the identifiers to know that. But I'm not sure.
Okay.
And we
type-
don't, Commissioner Fox. We cannot ask that when a child enrolls.
Okay. How many students are taking ESL?
Again, some of these, this is kind of in the weeds. I would have to go to our federal programs department. I could get these numbers. I do know that there are state requirements, though, that for a certain amount of ESL students, there is a requirement to have a dedicated position on those ratios. Right. So we are compelled by law to actually have, once you reach those certain numbers of ratios, you're compelled by law to actually meet those ratios. Okay. We can get that though.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. Question kind of going along with I guess the income disparities of the students. Looking at the school nutrition program, looking at free and reduced lunch, how vulnerable are we? Because we do rely heavily on grants for the breakfast and lunch programs, and so I was looking here that the current funding for free and reduced lunch is $4.54, and that's what we're getting grants for, and that's if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the level at which they're reimbursing us for those free and reduced lunches, correct?
And then
we're charging $3
with our school nutrition director, but we do we heavily rely upon United States, the Department of Agriculture reimbursements for that fund. Yes.
Okay, and so knowing that the children here, if they're not well fed, then they don't learn well either.
Yes. Sir.
And we're taking responsibility for them while they're in our care. How vulnerable do you predict that we are for these programs being reduced or us having to find other local funds to fill that void?
Yeah, that's a great question, and unfortunately, that's we've heard some conflicting reports. We've heard that this would be something separate as opposed to any decisions that's made for with respect to Title I or IDEA. So we've heard that, but it is federal funds, right? And so I have personally not heard of any planned cuts for that. I think that what has us a little bit on edge is kind of the lack of information and some of the volatility that's occurred with other grants, and I think that's a little bit of why we're approaching this with caution. But again, we're just proceeding with business as usual as the state has told us to do until we hear anything further. So we're very much hopeful that we wouldn't see any significant cuts into that program. But that's definitely, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is definitely a significant amount of funding, probably, I probably shouldn't guess here, $25 million or more probably.
Yeah, it looks like according to the USDA, that $18.7 million, and USDA breakfast is $5.4 million. So
it funds the majority of our budget in school nutrition. So yeah, that's definitely one we keep our eyes on. In fact, if you took IDEA, the Title I, you took school nutrition, those are going to be other than ESSER, and of course that's slowly evaporating away. Those are our biggest ones.
Okay, and then looking here at the just certain line items where it's purchased food costs, is that something you bid out on a multi-year basis? Obviously, trying to maintain quality of the food.
Right. Right. So that's handled. So school nutrition's a little bit different. It's a separate entity. While it is, nevertheless, it's a unit of Knox County Schools. So our food service director largely manages that. So, but yes, they would be subject to procurement requirements as well.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the commission for Mr. McPherson? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate the report.
Thanks.
Next on our agenda is a summary report and information from our finance director, Mr. Chris Caldwell. If you would please join us at the podium. Give your name and address for the record. And you have a digital presentation as well to follow along with. And I didn't see a summary report on the digital version, but maybe that's in the email.
No, we we didn't get to that.
Okay.
Ultimately, it's not changed that much, and so we'll just talk about that as we go. Chris Caldwell, 400 Main Street. Good afternoon. You have a monthly financial update that goes through March. We will go through that a page at a time, and then please stop me if you have questions. You can stop me at any point, and then we'll go from there. I'm old now, so I can't see without readers, so I can't see you now. But if you turn to page 4 of the document, it's our summary schedule, which is what we typically focus on a lot. And I'll just touch on a few things related to this. As we said, this is through March, so 9 months of the fiscal year. If you look at the general fund as it relates to revenues, you will notice that we have collected to date a little over $177 million. Compared to a year ago was 181.9. So we're actually below where we were this time a year ago in collections by a little over 4.7 million. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And so that is so revenue down as it relates to to the general fund, and then skipping down a little bit to engineering and public works, you'll see we have collected about 15.5 compared to about 15.9 a year ago, so down about 400,000. Debt service fund 80.6 compared to 78.6, up to 2 million. It's not as good as it seems. We moved 4 pennies in this budget from schools to debt service, so that number should be higher than what it is. And we'll touch on in a minute on what relates to that. I won't touch on schools. Ron touched on that. If you go down to the expenditure side, you look at the general fund again, 171.5 million in expenses. A year ago was 166. So expenses up about 5.3. So if you take the increase in expenses and the decrease in revenue, general fund is net about $10 million down from where it was a year ago. A lot of that on the revenue side relates to property tax ratio. We've talked about that time and time again about the impact of that ratio. The assessor has told us that equates to about $9.6 million in loss as it relates to revenue. That's not all just in the general fund, right? So that's general fund, debt service fund, and schools. And so we definitely feel the impact of that property tax ratio as we're ending FY 2025, and as we've discussed, its impact is still in the FY 26 budget, which we will talk about at some point today. And so, once again, property tax ratio being at 71% impacts business, personal property, public utilities, and we also know that as businesses will protest their property tax, they will also ask for that ratio to be applied. And so when that happens, then they can also get a reduction there. So that's kind of the impact that we feel.
Mr. Caldwell, will you, just quickly, since you were talking about the discount ratio, we made a decision recently about when and how we do assessments, which will eliminate the ability for utilities and some companies to ask for a discount.
Correct.
Can you talk about that for a second?
So this commission, along with the property assessor, and with the urging of the comptroller of the state, you all agreed to go to a 2-year cycle, a 2-year reappraisal cycle. What that does, that 2-year cycle takes the property tax ratio off the table. That ratio by state law only applies if you do a 3, 4, 5, or 6-year reappraisal cycle. So you all have corrected that problem. It doesn't take effect. We can't move it up. It takes effect once the next reappraisal happens, which is next year. So reappraisal happens next year. we will have a new certified tax rate then. And then going forward, we're on a 2-year appraisal cycle. Does a couple of things, right? So one, there is not as big of fluctuations as our citizens see currently in our 4-year cycle. So it becomes more routine and not as big changes for them to see. Two, to Commissioner Jay's point, it takes the property tax ratio off the table. I was at a conference on Thursday, and we had a conversation about property tax ratio, and a member of the Anderson County Finance Department was there. Their ratio was 52%. 52%. Ours was 71. So think about that impact that can have on a tax base. And as the comptroller says, what that's doing when you don't go to a 2-year cycle, when you stay at that 3 to 6 year cycle, your residents, so your citizens, are basically propping up the businesses, right? Because they're the ones that's getting that discount, not citizens. And so I think it's important to know you all have fixed it, but it's not like a quick fix, right? It's a fix once this next reappraisal cycle happens. Looking on down on the expense side, I would point out that total expenses, looking at total operating funds, is about $25.5 million more than a year ago. That's to be expected, right? So what did we do? We had raises, right, in January. School system had increases as it relates to raises and also increase in state funding. So we're not surprised by the increase in expenses. Those should have been there. But when you look at the net numbers on the bottom of that page, if you look at revenues and operating transfers in, we're about $1.4 million more than a year ago. So revenue's basically flat, right? And the expenses then are $25 million more. So, yeah, does that mean we're going to end the year in the hole, $25 million? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is these budget surpluses that we've experienced the past few years will basically flatten out, right? So schools, general funds, some other funds have experienced budget surpluses, and from what we have done in the budget in 25, and because of the property tax ratio, budget surpluses will probably be flat if they exist at all. Questions about this page before we go on? Going on, we'll go to page 6.
Chris, could you please pull the mic closer to you? We're trying to compete with the rain here, and it's harder and harder to hear.
Mother Nature does not like me. It's okay. Most people don't.
Speak up.
Okay. Page 6, general fund. This is looking at local option sales tax just related to the general fund. So when you look at that, at the middle box, the last sales tax that we got was for April. So we get that at about the 20th of April. It's for February sales. You probably got my email, unless you have programmed all my emails to go to your junk file. You've got an email from me basically saying that countywide, including the city and the town of Farragut, that our sales tax was down 2.4% countywide, right? And so I think that's important to note. That's February collections. The county part was actually up, but you can get that by just a change of spending habits. But countywide, we were down 2.4%. Curious to see if that's a trend and where that goes. And so, but the important part here is we are still through April or through February collections trending about, say, 1.2 million ahead of budget. So we had budgeted in the general fund and solid waste about 13.6 million, in local option sales tax collections. We're projected to get in at about 14.7 or 14.8. We budgeted in 26 about 14.2. So that just kind of shows you there's little room there for error as it relates to our portion of local option sales tax. Turning the page to the school piece, that number really took a hit in April. Our projection in 26 for sales tax collections is about 253.4. Going to be like right at that number to end this year. That's a number that probably, if you ask Ron from a budget standpoint on 26, is a little scary. But we'll have to see how the rest of this year trends as it relates to sales tax. But for the year in 25, ahead of budget projections by probably $6 million or so. Then the next page, page 8, engineering and public works, once again trending at about $10.4 million with a budget of 9.6. 9.8 was the budget for 25. Our 26 projections about 10.5, and so engineering and public works basically is trending about what we had projected for in 26. We'll go to page 9. We typically don't spend a lot. Before we go to page 9, any questions on sales tax as a whole? Local option sales tax.
Can't see your light. Oh. Okay. Commissioner Fox?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Jay. I just to recap, you're saying we're down a little bit this year across the board when it comes to sales tax revenue?
I would tell you that in April we were down. We have trended the last few months about flat. April, which is February, collections was down 2.4%. When you look what I would call county-wide, which includes the city and the town. So we have saw a flattening. The state has been flat pretty much the whole year. Interestingly enough, we've stayed a little ahead of them. I think it's going to be interesting to see what we see the next few months as we close out this fiscal year, and gives us an idea of how we projected FY26. But definitely the last couple of months of flattening has occurred in local option sales tax.
But you said the county portion, like the non-city portion of the county, actually was a little up?
It was, yeah. Okay. So county portion was up, city portion was down, and Farragut was pretty flat, okay? So let me just say, things that can change that. There is a new Chick-fil-A that opened in Hardin Valley. It's the first Chick-fil-A in the county, if you're curious. I'm not promoting Chick-fil-A. I want to give you an example. If you're a fan of Chick-fil-A, you used to not be able to go to that one, right? So you probably went to the one maybe in Turkey Creek, right, which happens to be in the city. So if you changed your habits, then that can change sales tax. That's why I think it's better to look at it holistically from a trending standpoint, because it's showing what we're doing as a whole. But on the county side, it was up a little.
Okay. Thank you.
Page 9. We never spend a lot of time on this, but this property tax analysis page, you see a 5-year average compared to FY25. You see that that's down 2%. That's probably just all ratio, right? So that ratio definitely has an impact in everything that's going on. Then if you go on then to page 11, I'm going to focus on page 11 as it relates to property tax, and I'll explain why. So if you look at FY25 through March, our total collections were 123.4, okay? If you look at what we collected in all of 24 in this fund, is about 125.8 right next to that, right? So we are about 2.4 million down in this fund on property tax, current property tax, than where we were than where we ended the year. Okay, those last few months, April through August, we collected about 1.9 million last year. If we did that again this year, we'd be about 500,000 less than where we were a year ago. So just showing you that the actual numbers are a little lower than where they were. So it's the first time that I can remember where you can look at current property taxes and actually see it go down, right? We usually been trending up like that, you know. Not big increases, but certain increases just because of growth. Well, we still have growth, but that growth has been eaten up all by this ratio, leaving us at a point to where when you look at 24 to 25, at best we'll be even, at worst we'll be down a little bit, right? And so all because of a ratio, and it has an impact. And it'll be that way again in 26. There could be we could see some growth in 26, a little bit of growth. That ratio still plays a part. There is a little more growth in 26 than in 27. In 27, when we get to budget FY 27, it's like, I kind of explain it like this. It's like the leprechaun from Lucky Charms comes in with a pot of gold and says, you can have your money back now. Here's your 9.6 million. I mean, it seems odd, right? But ultimately, every bit of that, quote unquote, I call it a discount, and I get my hand slapped. Every bit of that discount from that ratio comes back. So KUB, not to pick on them, but that amount goes back to 100%. They don't get that ratio anymore. Any business, personal property doesn't get that ratio anymore. So all of it just comes back. And so when we get to FY 27, we're going to see, like, you know, based depending on what the economy does, but if it's pretty consistent, big increases, right? All related to property tax, because the ratio comes back to 1% or 100%, and as Commissioner Jay said, stays at 100% for the foreseeable future. It never goes back down. That just shows you the impact. And so if you look at where we are today and what we have to catch up to, we'd have to collect April through August about $5.6 million in current property taxes to equal to where we were a year ago. We'll get close. We'll see if we get there, but we'll get close. But just shows you the impact that the ratio has. Go ahead.
Just as you finish this executive, Commissioner Rawls had a question.
Mr. Caldwell, can we go back to the debt service for a second on page 9? So it's at 25%, 26. Do we trend up 27, 28 more than that 25% in the debt service fund?
What page are you? What page?
On 9.
10, probably 10.
Oh, is that 10?
No, the bottom of 9
No, it's
has
not,
debt
yeah.
service.
Oh, that
Bottom.
page there?
Yeah. The debt service.
Yeah,
fund,
so ultimately, in 26, the portion of debt service as far as the breakdown by fund will stay the same. So that's what we have allocated to pay for the debt service fund. To answer your question about pending debt service payments that are coming, right? So we know kind of beginning in 27, 28, and then 29, we see some big spikes, right, as it relates to our debt service payments. And so a few things that will go into that. We've got reserves, and let me talk about this. A lot of people think when I just say reserves, they think we have one rainy day fund. Keep in mind, we have a rainy day fund in each fund, right? So when I talk about there's a $30 million rainy day fund in debt service, that's set aside strictly just for debt service. You with me? So the $100 million that we have in the general fund, I think it's could be all is about $100 million, is set aside just for the general fund. So we have $30 million set aside for debt service. At that point, in 27, 28, and 29, some of those reserves start to get used, right? Because ultimately, unless we have more sources coming in to pay for those debt service payments, they're going to come due regardless, and so we have to pay them. So unless there is more revenue coming to pay for them, we could move pennies from other funds to debt service to pay for those, but then you're kind of cutting operations at that point. So we have always anticipated these payments coming due, okay? Are they uncomfortable? 100%, absolutely they're uncomfortable. Will they basically eat our reserves? They will, 100%. I mean, I'm not saying that they'll all go away, but a lot of them will go away. There could be some things that happen along the way that can benefit us. If interest rates go down, we may refund some debt that could save us some interest. We're always looking for things like that. Some things that we have done, as an example, I talked to Commissioner Jay after the budget address, who ran me down and said, "Your numbers have changed in here from last year related to debt," and they have. And the reason for that is we have not issued the bonds for FY25 yet, right? So by doing that, we have pushed back some of that interest cost, which lowers that amount a little bit. We'll eventually issue debt for 25, but we got to a point of time to where we have spend down requirements on bonds. So when we issue bonds, you got to hit certain spend down requirements. So just to make it easy numbers. If we issued $100 million worth of bonds July 1, okay, and we issued them July 1, we've got 6 months to spend 25% of those bonds, and to actually show those expenses. If we do not hit that spend down request, then any interest that we earn on that debt, we got to send back to the IRS. We had to do that with the 23 bonds. We didn't hit our spend down. It's 25% in 6 months. It's 50% in 12 months. It's 75% in 18 months, and it's 100% in 2 years. If you don't hit those spend down requirements, then the interest that you earn, which for us can be substantial, you've got to send that back. That interest income shows up in the operational budgets of schools and ours. So when we don't hit spend down, it's a big deal, right? So because we did not hit spend down in 22, we've been trying our best to hit spend down on our 23 and 24 year bonds before we even issue 25, okay? So that's what led to some of the changes from 25 to 26 as it relates to those numbers creeping down a little bit. Ultimately, it could benefit us. It looks like interest rates may creep down at the end of this year. So when we issue those bonds, we could be in a better spot than we were. But when those payments do come, we will pay them. As we prepare any budget, there's two things you must pay for first in any budget: debt, pensions. Right? It's that simple. If you can't pay anything else, you pay those two first. We will do that, and it can make for some uncomfortable times, and we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. But we do have reserves to help us bridge that gap.
Okay, one more question. So we'll dip into the reserves, but will we dip into the reserves because our revenue will be flat in 7 or
No.
This is an assumption, and I'm asking you about an assumption. Is the assumption that 7 and 8 revenue will be flat?
No, I think, I'm not an economist. I'm not Dr.
Yeah.
Bill Fox like like Andy's father, so
Yeah.
I can't tell you for sure.
Can you have your
But-
dad come here and answer?
But I will tell you this. I think from a property tax standpoint, no, we'll have growth, right? I think in 27, we get all the ratio back, and then any growth that we have will be on top of that. Sales tax, I can't speak to, but ultimately, if we're not in a recession and things are normal, we typically have some growth.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jackson?
Thank you, Chairman Larson. I got a question for you about you were talking about having to give back the interest. And you said we had to do that in 22. Do you know?
23.
Or 23?
I was wrong by you, yeah.
I mean, I know this is a prior commission and that's prior, but what was the impact to the county on having to pay back that interest? Do you recall?
So this is important. And so let me give you something to think about. And we had this conversation with our friends at schools this year. We're going to fix a project that's in the 26 capital plan, that the big amounts in 27, we're going to spread that out. I'll give you an example. We and we not issued the bonds yet. In 25, we put all $47 million for Farragut Elementary in the capital plan, right? If we would have issued those bonds July 1 of this year, to date on that school, we spent less than $3 million. So that one project would have kept us from hitting debt spend down, right? So we would have to send that interest back. I believe, I'm going to look at Perry, but I believe the amount of interest that we think it probably cost us in 23, was it $3 million? Was it? Yeah. How much? A little over $1 million. So it was $1 million that we had to send back.
$1 million in interest income we had to give back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's substantial, right?
How are we as a commission supposed to monitor, or how do we, ensure that, when we issue bonds, like the bonds that were issued last year or the bonds that are issued this year or subsequent years, that we are hitting these targets? Because, to make things math simple, if we borrow money at 6, but we're earning interest at 4 on, we're going to have to pay the full 6 rather than getting that. You're going to have to give back 4% interest on whatever that number is. Yeah.
Typically, what we do, and so the reason we sent like $1 million back, we probably issued 20-year bonds at about 3.5%, and their investments we were earning probably close to 5%, right? And then had to arbitrage that because we didn't hit our spend down requirements. So how can you monitor that? I tell you, it's very hard, right? So we could have the utmost confidence that a project could be done. It could hit a snag, and then you not hit that spend down requirement. It's based in the aggregate of the amount of bonds that you issued plus the interest you earned, right? So we monitor it with our financial advisors. Selfishly, I would say this to you. If we're in a disagreement with a department on how we should structure debt, I would say listen to us. I'm not trying to be rude. We're going to fund the project, but if we can't hit spend down, then we're hurting ourselves, right? And so our department's always done a really good job. It's not me, just so you know. They just send me up here to speak and smile at you. But ultimately, we will structure it in a way that we think we can hit those spend down requirements. In 23, we did not hit those spend down requirements. I would tell you that our financial advisor said there's basically been one project in this region that was completed on time that wasn't behind schedule. You don't know what it was? You guess?
Baseball stadium.
The stadium. It was the one thing that wasn't behind schedule and was completed on time. Everything else is late in nature. The tendency, though, from a department, whether it's a county department, whether it's schools or whatever, is you want to put all that money in year one, right? Because I've got to get that project funded, because if I don't, what if they don't fund it in year two? I would just say to you all, we put things in here from the standpoint of our spend down on the bonds have to equal the timeline of construction, right? Because if we don't do it that way, then we're going to get in trouble again and not hit spend down. And
I guess to my original question, though, is, as a county commission and as finance committee, how do we monitor and how do we know and recognize that we might have an issue that we may end up losing $1 million or even more?
I think it's when we come to you at finance committee and say, we have an issue, right? Like, as an example, we got an email a week ago that basically, was it a week ago from Stephen, that said, you need to draw down or spend $5 million by the end of May, or you're not going to hit your spend down requirements on 24, right? So we either spend in capital $5 million by the end of May, or we won't hit our spend down requirements. Now, do we have control over that? No. And really, I mean, we can't say, I need you to build that really fast, or send us a really big bill. I mean, you're basing it on the hopes of, when we project how that spend down is going to go, that the construction falls in line with that. We really have, and I'll tell you this, and it's nobody's fault. That is a hard conversation to have with the department when they want a project funded, right? Because they think they need it funded right away. Well, I get that, but if what we're saying is we're going to fund it, but we're going to fund it over your spending schedule. So if you know it's going to take 18 months to build a building, then that's what should be mirrored in the capital plan, not everything in year one. And I think because of arbitrage being a real thing now with higher interest rates, it's become a bigger issue. And so we got to pay closer attention to spend down in these. Listen, we think we're going to, just so you know, I'll put you at ease. Our senior accountant who's over debt doesn't think there's going to be an issue with hitting our $5 million at the end of May. So you can put your head on your pillow tonight, feel pretty good, it's okay. Now, we won't know that until then, but we think it's okay. But we rely on them to tell us when our spend down is, and not because of me, our person at Raymond James says that Melanie Wilk, who does this for us, he's never saw anybody as good as her as nailing spend down. So we're typically really good. Was one year we weren't, right? And it could be a project that just got delayed. And when that happens, if it's a big one, it can be big.
Commissioner Hill? Oh, sorry.
Well, just to your comments, Commissioner Jackson, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Caldwell, but this wasn't a surprise. We knew it was coming. And if there was any way that money could have been spent to avoid that penalty, it would have been done. It genuinely was delay that was just beyond Commission's control and certainly beyond the executive branch's control.
And I think a lot of it too, and you'll remember this with your private work, right, is everybody after COVID, there's all this money to spend, right, and everybody's trying to get all these projects done, and we have this December 26 timeline to get these projects done. What happened? Everybody's trying to rush to get it done, and there's not enough work to go around, so things get delayed. I think that was part of the problem with 23. We don't think we're going to have an issue in 24. We will wait and issue 25 probably no earlier than December. And then it puts it, listen, I will tell you this. Some counties smaller than us, they don't have that luxury, right? They have to make sure that they have to issue debt July 1 of that fiscal year to fund capital projects. Thankfully, we're not that way, and we have really good cash flow, and we can float some of that, and then it helps with our spend down. Next. So pages 12 and 13 of your document will be kind of messed up. There was a error in the tax rate as it related to debt service and schools fund. We have made a correction. So it looks really wonky in March, but from a percentage standpoint, it will be right going forward. And then if you go to page 14, that's the hotel motel fund, you will see that through April, which is February collections, just the composite trends about 2.7 million ahead of budget. We had a budget of 11.5, trending to bring in probably 14 to 15 again, which is typically where we were a year ago. So that fund continues to do well, I should say. We're seeing a little bit of a flattening, but it's not dropping. And so that's at a pretty healthy level. You go to page 15, that's wheel tax. Wheel tax through March is about $600,000 more than it was a year ago. Our budget for 26 was about 15.3. We're probably on pace for about 15.5 this year. And then go to page 16 and we'll look at court revenue. You'll see that chancery and probate are about 27,000 down, which is about 10% down. Criminals up about 465,000. Circuit civil and juveniles up about 126,000. And so that's where we are through March. If you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer anything. If not, I can happily sit down.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Mr. Caldwell. Item number 8 on our agenda is a summary report from Knox County Tax Collection Investments from our trustee, Mr. Biggs.
Hello, I am Linda McGinnis, and I work in legal and collections in the trustee's office. And Justin had a prior engagement, as well as our CFO. She's on leave this week, Pearl Mathis. So you're stuck with me. But Chris Caldwell did a great job about talking about a lot of things that we already have on our report as far as collections and things like that. We're still getting a great rate at First Bank at 4.65, and on our money market account with Smart Bank at 4%. Our core investment portfolio has grown to $45 million now, which is yielding an average of 2.8% on our investments. And that's being used as a hedge for debt service payments and things like that. Or when we don't have a BEP payment, we use that money then. And then Pearl had the interest analysis through the end of March. So this would be from September through the end of March. We have earned a total of $8,550,000 in interest this year. Okay. And as Chris spoke, our collections for the 2024 tax year is at 96.52%. $296 million. We're down about $10 million in collections for 2024. But it's about the same as it was last year. But of course, the percentage is down because the levy is up. So tax relief went down a little bit. We do have some pending applications as far as tax relief is concerned. But the income on the tax relief program is only $35,000. So not as many people can qualify for that program. And that's the reason why you see the reduction in numbers. There's less and less people who can live on $35,000 a year. They're living with their families or living in an assisted living or living somewhere else, not in their own home. We did have substantial increase in tax freeze growth this year. We went from 3,998 to 4,548 in 2024, and that's also due to the increase in the income. It increased, as you are probably aware of, up to $60,000 a year.
Can I ask you a question about those two items?
Yes, sir.
2 or 3 finance committee meetings ago, and we've asked several times from the trustees and his office to provide us actual financial information related to the tax freeze and tax relief. How many people are on the program? You have, looks like 919 new applications,
Yes, sir.
another 414 in the other one. How many people are on it? And essentially, even though we understand we have approved and supported that program for seniors and veterans and others, what is the financial implication of that program? We haven't yet received any information about what is that cost. The more people apply, the less taxes are collected.
Okay. Well,
right? So what is that number? And we need somebody at some point to come back to this committee and say, here's all the enrollees, here's how much it, what was their taxes before, what is it after, what is that less to the budget, and what can we see if a trend? So if 10,000 people more apply, we can understand what that financial implication is for us. So
it's as
I'll ask you.
I was thinking that Justin had given you those numbers or given someone those numbers. Okay, as far as the actual assessment value from 2022 versus 2023, and then again from 23 to 24, and the value in the freeze program actually went down.
Okay. If you could find that and send that to this committee, that would be helpful.
Okay, absolutely. I'll do that. And then the additional item is the tax sale 25 that we are working on. 1,511 properties were initially selected for that tax sale. 744 have already paid out. And we've collected over $2 million just from those properties so far. We have now just summarized the listing of summonses and filed a complaint. We have over 4,000 summonses that we have to serve. Our approximate date that we are going to try to serve those by is the end of August. And then from that point forward, so hopefully that will also be in conjunction with getting some additional revenue during the summer months when we're not getting a lot of revenue from tax collections. Also, the tax sale, the approximate date of that tax sale will be around April of next year. Then the last thing is the 6-year comparison report on the banking statements for June, July, and August of 24. As you know, as far as the unfavorable within the market, retail and food service are struggling, filing for bankruptcy. And we have seen a slight increase in mortgage bankruptcy, Chapter 13 filings. We're seeing almost every single bankruptcy that's coming in that is not a business is a Chapter 13 with a mortgage. And we had 2 mortgage companies send us requests for payment listings because they're finding more and more people who are not paying their taxes on time when they have a home equity loan. And so those mortgage companies are having to send out letters, reminder letters, and that could also be part of the shortfall on the 2024 taxes. And the only additional thing that we're doing is just watching the interest rate, make sure it doesn't change, along with Stephen, who helps us with our investments to get any additional possible investments if something matures in between now and the next few years. We go at about 3.5 years on our investments. A little bit every single year. That way they don't all mature at the same time. So does anybody have any questions?
Anyone? Commissioner Jackson.
Well, first of all, to let everybody know, I kind of looked up the 30-day treasury while we were sitting here, and it's at 437. So if we're making more than the treasury on the bank deposit, that's excellent. As a banker, we usually try to keep that below the treasury so we can make a spread on our money, but that's excellent. with Commissioner Biggs gone, I had some questions, but we'll see if you can answer some of these. But do you know approximately how, when we do property tax collections, what percentage are done electronically now versus in person or mail?
Well, actually, electronically, as far as payments are concerned, okay, I would say a considerable amount are done through electronic payment. We have more and more people paying with credit cards and e-checks than ever before. But we still have quite a few people who want to mail in that check or deliver that check, hand deliver that check. We are aware of other counties in Tennessee that are trying to go to email their tax statement to them. And at this point in time, we just don't think that's going to work. You'd be surprised how many people call if for some reason they don't get their tax statement. They physically want a piece of paper, a paper copy for their, for the income taxes. But I'm not exactly sure what the exact percentage is, but I can find out.
Okay, that'd be great to know. Do you all use for the paper that is mailed in, do you use a lockbox or is that just manually?
No, it's
done?
Manually entered. Each and every single check is entered manually. But we do have a remittance processor. So what that does is for the time of years where we have bulk incoming, the remittance processor will transmit current taxes only. So if they only owe for 2024, it can read that check and automatically post. Then it's just a matter of adding up those checks manually to make sure that it matches what the computer has put in. So those are done with the remittance processor.
Okay. Then how many satellite offices do we have in operation with the trustee's office right now?
We still have just the 3 because the Farragut location is still closed.
Okay. Is that planning to be reopened?
I've heard that there were plans to have it open in the fall.
In the fall? Is it undergoing renovations?
Yes.
Okay.
For several years, from what I hear.
I don't have any other.
Commissioner Russell?
Yes, actually, I believe the Farragut satellite office just reopened.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Yes.
Commissioner Durrett?
Thank you, Chairman Jay. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
I'm not sure if I heard it and I may have missed it. Did you say there will or will not be a tax sale this year? And I did hear 26, but
Yes.
No tax sale 25?
No tax sale in 25. Okay. There was no way that we could file the complaint and get everything served and file, everything that needed to be done with the motions, the default judgment, and the publication until next year to get it next year.
You said there were 4,000?
4,114
Wow.
to be served.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Oster?
Thank you, Commissioner Jay. This is kind of just a statement, and I wanted to just give this to you, and also that everybody would know. We are actually opening a new office over in Cedar Bluff with the trustee's office, the health department, the county clerk, and so the Cedar Bluff branch will be closed May 14th through May 16th, and then they will be open in the new location, I believe on the 19th. But that's a pretty big office that we use over in Cedar Bluff, and it's the opportunity is great because everybody is going to be able to do so much more in the office than they were with parking also. Could you also ask Trustee Biggs that he was supposed to get a list of the tax-free seniors to Chief Seymour for the Rural Metro?
Okay.
And they haven't received those names yet. So can you do that? Because their rates are going up, but they want to be able to tack on with you guys and not charge the seniors that are on tax-frees that amount of money.
Now, I'll probably have to check with the law director's office to make absolutely sure that we can release that information.
Okay. I don't know if you can or not, but okay.
Yeah.
If you just, Trustee Biggs will work with Director Moyers, that would be great. So we can get that for him. Okay, thank you.
I have one additional question related to the tax sale in 2026.
Yes, sir.
When will that information, when will that tax sale list be locked in internally within the trustee's office? And when will that information be given to the commission and to the public? What does that timeline look like?
Probably within the next 30 days. They are finalizing all of the summonses in the list right now. Like I said, and when they get everything completely done, that's when he will either publish the list. I'm not sure if they're going to do it on the website because we had issues with fraud last year. On the website, we're, I think, doing it by special request, but we're more than willing to send a copy to the commission.
I think the commission would definitely like to have a copy of that when it's published
Okay.
in advance. Any other questions for the trustee's office?
Mr. J?
Commissioner Hill?
Thank you. If you'll help me refresh my memory, when I went online to pay taxes this last year, is it correct that the only way you can pay online is with an additional fee, credit card fee?
Well, yes, with the credit card, there is a 2.5% fee, as the city charges a fee as well for credit cards. Any credit card company charges a fee. Now, if you use a check, it is just $1. It's not a percentage fee. So whether you're writing it for $1,000 or $10, it's only $1 for an e-check.
For an e-check?
E-check.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, outside of e-check, there's no way to make a direct deposit.
You can
Like a bank transfer? Is that what you're, like a ETF? HCCH.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Too many acronyms.
Now, I mean, other than mailing it to the office.
Right.
Yeah, that is, or dropping it by one of our locations.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any new business to come before the committee today? Is there any upcoming finance committee meeting topics that anybody would like to add to future meetings? If not, if you do, send it. Yes, sir. Commissioner Fox?
Thank you, Chairman Jay. What, is there a list of topics that are currently set in an agenda?
No, this is a quarterly, regularly scheduled quarterly finance committee meeting, and then either as requested, sometimes somebody says, hey, I really want to dive, like last fall, we did a deep dive into our debt. You may want to know about a deep dive into sales tax, all the revenue that comes in from the city and the county. Like, if there's a topic that relates to this committee and you would like to put it on the agenda for the future, just let me know. I'll work with the finance department, gather that data, and do a special presentation. So it's a sort of it's always an open plug. You guys have to let me know what you want, and I'll make it happen.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rawls?
Yeah, I'd like to see us put something on the agenda for next quarter, if we can. I'd like to talk about potential revenue sources, like true revenue sources, because we see that revenue is flat. But we discuss debt, but do we look at opportunities for revenue? And so, if Chris Caldwell could put something like that together, that'd be great.
We'll work on that. We'll list
Thank you,
out.
sir. Thank you, sir.
I think I think everybody's surprised. We kind of lump things together in the budget and the finance reports, but when you break out all the revenue sources, it's actually, it's a lot larger than people think, but it's 1,000 micro lines versus.
Yeah, we don't have to go that.
Well, but I think it's important just to see where it all comes from. But when we do that, we'll also provide, things in the past that have gone away or things in the future that could be added. So, okay. Commissioner Thompson? Oh, you just had that look like you wanted to talk. Okay, never mind. No, we do not need a big sale in Knox County. All right, is there anything else we've come before this committee? Yes, Commissioner Jackson.
I just wanted to mention one thing, just some economic analysis for the Finance Committee, is that I thought it was fairly interesting that we have a decrease in sales taxes. And this is from the Bureau of Economic Analysis by the U.S. Census Bureau. And it is a percentage of the businesses that are impacted by tariffs as a percentage of your GDP. And in Tennessee, we're 21.5%. That doesn't mean a whole lot to you just hearing that. But where do you think we are nationwide, scale of 1 to 50, and how much these tariffs impact Tennessee? We're 3. We're number 3, and Kentucky is number 1. Michigan is number 2. So it's going to be very interesting to see, how these continued sales taxes go, because we in Tennessee overall, and I don't have this broken down by county, are one of the most highly sensitive regions of the country.
All right, seeing no objection or no other information to come before this committee, the Finance Committee is adjourned.